Learn oilfield stuff. Hey there! Welcome back to Learn Oilfield Stuff, the ultimate channel for all things related to the oil and gas industry. Our expert team is dedicated to bringing you informative articles in a fun and engaging way. So, if you're ready to take your knowledge of the oilfield to the next level, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Welcome back to our series on drilling rheology and hydraulics terminology. In Part 1, we covered the following terminologies: annular velocity, annular volume, average specific gravity, base oil, barite sag, Bingham plastic rheological model, bed height, bottom hole temperature, compressibility coefficient, consistency index, critical velocity, critical flow rate. In Part 2, we'll be exploring concepts like friction factor and equivalent circulating density. These terms may sound intimidating, but don't worry, we'll break them down into easy-to-understand concepts. First up is eccentricity, which describes the position of one pipe or object inside another pipe or hole. In the oil field, we often use this term to describe the position of the drill pipe inside the annulus. When the drill pipe lies directly in the middle of the annulus, the drill pipe position is concentric, and the eccentricity factor is 0. However, as the drill pipe moves to one side of the annulus, the drill pipe becomes increasingly eccentric. If the sides of the drill pipe come in contact with the wall of the annulus, the drill pipe is fully eccentric, and the eccentricity factor is 1. But why is this important? Well, drill pipe eccentricity can affect pressure drops in the annulus by reducing the frictional forces of fluid flow. A fully concentric drill pipe in an annulus has higher pressure drops than an eccentric one. In some disciplines like cementing, eccentricity is called standoff. If the standoff is 1, then E equals 0, and if the standoff is 0, then E equals 1. It is very important in cementing operations to make the casing as close to concentric as practical to minimize cement channeling to the widest gap and not fully filling the narrow gap. To calculate the eccentricity of a pipe inside a hole, we can use the formula E equals R, D, R, where E is the eccentricity, a fraction between 0 and 1, R is the radius of the hole, and D is the distance from the center of the pipe to the center of the hole. The eccentricity can also be expressed as a percentage by multiplying E by 100. Next up is equivalent circulating density, or ECD. This is a key parameter in drilling because it helps us maintain a stable wellbore by controlling the pressure of the drilling fluid. ECD is a term used in drilling to describe the effective density of the circulating fluid in the wellbore. It is a combination of the mud weight and the pressure loss due to friction. The mud weight is the density of the drilling mud, while the friction pressure loss is caused by the fluid flow in the annulus. To calculate ECD, we use the formula ECD equals MW plus PF 0.052 TVD, where PF is the friction pressure loss inside, 0.052 is a conversion factor, and TVD is the true vertical depth of the wellbore in feet. ECD is important because if it's too high, it can cause formation damage, lost circulation, and other issues that can lead to costly downtime and lost production. Now, equivalent static density, ESD. ESD is the pressure exerted by a static fluid column at a specific true vertical depth, TVD. It is expressed in terms of fluid density that would be required to exert an equivalent pressure at that depth. The ESD equation is ESD equals 0.052 x density x TVD, where density is the fluid density in pounds per gallon and TVD is the true vertical depth in feet. However, this equation is only useful in the simplest terms and is not sufficient to get accurate downhole static pressures. This is because fluid expansion due to formation temperature and fluid compressibility due to pressure changes the density of the fluid downhole and therefore the pressure it exerts. Next, let's discuss friction factor. Friction factor represents the resistance offered by the pipe wall to the fluid flow and is dependent on various factors such as pipe diameter, velocity of flow, viscosity of the fluid, and surface roughness of the pipe. The friction factor is an important parameter in determining the pressure drop in a pipeline. In laminar flow, where the Reynolds number is less than 2100, the friction factor is constant and can be calculated using the Poiseuille equation. F equals 64, Re, where Re is the Reynolds number. For turbulent flow, where the Reynolds number is greater than 4000, the friction factor can be calculated using the Colebrook equation. 1, square root F equals minus 2 log E, D, 3.7 plus 2.51, Re square root F, where E, D is the relative roughness and Re is the Reynolds number. The Moody diagram is a useful tool to determine the friction factor for a given fluid and pipe diameter. Effective viscosity is another important parameter used in drilling fluid hydraulics. It describes the viscosity of the fluid as it flows through a specific geometry, such as a wellbore. The effective viscosity considers the effects of shear stress and shear rate on the fluid and is dependent on the geometry of the flow path. The units of measurement for effective viscosity are cp, centipoise, or pa sec, Pascal second, depending on the system of measurement used. The effective viscosity is calculated as the ratio of shear stress to shear rate. The flow index N is a dimensionless parameter that characterizes the degree of non-Newtonian behavior of a fluid. It is an essential parameter used to evaluate non-Newtonian behavior in drilling fluids. Non-Newtonian fluids have viscosities that change with the shear rate, meaning that the force required to maintain a certain flow rate varies depending on the velocity of the fluid. The flow index can be calculated using the power law model, which is expressed as tau equals K, gamma, caret N, where tau is the shear stress, K is a constant, gamma is the shear rate, and N is the flow index. Flow regime. First off, let's define flow regime. It's basically how fluids behave when they flow through pipes, and there are three types of flow regimes: laminar, turbulent, and transition. In laminar flow, the fluid moves slowly in layers with little to no mixing between them. On the other hand, in turbulent flow, the fluid moves chaotically, and eddies or vortices may form. The transition regime is somewhere in between. To determine the flow regime, we use a dimensionless number called the Reynolds number, Re. It's calculated using the fluid velocity, density, viscosity, and pipe diameter. A low Reynolds number indicates laminar flow, a high Reynolds number indicates turbulent flow, and an intermediate Reynolds number indicates transition flow. Now, I know some of you might be intimidated by equations, but don't worry, we'll make it simple. The Reynolds number formula is Re equals rho Vd, mu, where rho is the fluid density, V is the fluid velocity, D is the pipe diameter, and mu is the fluid viscosity. So, why is flow regime so important in drilling fluid hydraulics? Well, it affects the pressure drop, friction factor, and overall behavior of the fluid. In laminar flow, the friction factor is proportional to the viscosity, while in turbulent flow, it is mainly dependent on the relative roughness of the pipe surface. In laminar flow, the pressure drop is linearly proportional to the flow rate, while in turbulent flow, it is proportional to the square of the flow rate. Key shear rate, and N is the flow index. Thanks for tuning in to part 2 of our series on drilling rheology and hydraulics terminology. But that's not all. In part 3, we'll be delving even deeper into the world of drilling, discussing things like hydraulic horsepower and laminar flow. So make sure you tune in to part 3 to keep expanding your knowledge.